Hi, everyone. Yep. Welcome to episode number 4 of the Trainer Edition podcast. Today, we're going to discuss the difference between sport-specific training and just regular gym work or regular strength training. So Tom's going to hopefully break some of that down for us, and we're going to have a nice in-depth conversation about which you should do. And maybe there's a bit around which one you should do. So let's kick off.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one, and I think the when part is going to be the crux of the whole thing. Like, because there's like a ridiculous amount of misinformation about, oh, do all this sport specific stuff, or no, don't do any sport specific stuff, do they? And I think the answer is when, more than anything else.
Absolutely.
But so yeah, if we think about some definitions, I guess, just to kind of categorize things when we're saying sports specific versus regular gym exercises. So we're talking about strength training or work that you would do in a gym to better yourself at your sport. Should you do something that mimics the movement of your sport, or should you be just doing regular sort of squats with a barbell or dumbbell, bench press, stuff like the regular gym exercises?
Yeah.
Should you be standing one-legged on a BOSU ball trying to pass a rugby ball?
Like the All Blacks.
The All Blacks. There's a good Instagram post I sent Hannah to demonstrate what the All Blacks do for their sports-specific training. And they stood one-legged on a BOSU ball, passing the rugby ball between themselves.
Yeah, I probably want to caveat this here. I could train the All Blacks and they would be a very good team. And that's nothing to do with my training philosophies or knowledge. They just are phenomenal players. So if they're doing BOSU ball, single-legged passes to each other, don't think that's why you're not an All Black or representing your country.
Maybe it is.
maybe, but no.
That's the secret, right? They actually gave it all away.
They did.
The secret sauce.
Secret behind their success. Not enough BOSU ball single-legged passes.
Yeah,
that's it.
And that ball should be weighted as well. That's the real secret. If you do it with a regular ball, you're just a tosser. But if you do it with a weighted ball, that's where it's at.
Yeah, and then if you want to take that up one more level, you do it with a blindfold.
Yeah,
you do it with a blindfold. That's it. I don't
20
actually
kilo ball being thrown at you with a blindfold.
You gotta hear.
Oh my god!
Do you reckon they do like agility work with like wrenches?
Yeah, like dodgeball. You can dodge a wrench. You can dodge a ball.
That's it.
Oh my god!
You can dodge a forward.
Yeah, if you go head first into the wrench, you are a forward. If you try and header it out the way,
definitely a forward.
That's your strategy.
If you sidestep it, get in the backs.
Get yourself a pot of hair gel and off you
go. So, I maybe we will come back to why they were doing that. I wonder whether that was a deliberate ploy to make all the other countries think that is the secret sauce. So while all other countries do that and learn absolutely nothing from it, I think what would be a really good question to just flesh out here first is that some people often you see people do stuff on BOSU balls, they call it functional training. Give me, or do you want to spell what is functional training and what it absolutely isn't? And then maybe we can move on to sports specific and gym training, because I think we just need to iron out functional first.
Yeah, I think people just tend to say functional is like it's supposed to represent daily life.
Yeah.
Although I find it never does. It just means you're probably on something unbalanced or in an awkward position, tends to be functional. Yeah. And I also don't understand what's not functional about a squat, seeing as when every time you get out of a chair, you squat.
Yeah.
So I find it very confusing. Like, I think it's just a buzzword that people like to use to make nice Instagram posts more than it's actually a relatively useful thing to do.
Yeah.
In a lot of capacities. Sport specific training is, as we mentioned, like mimicking movements that specifically you would do in your sport.
Yeah.
Normally under either an unstable surface or in a weighted condition.
Yeah.
So you're gonna, those weighted rugby balls would be a good example. Instead of doing grip work and things like that on a machine, you're going to pass a weighted rugby ball to build up those muscles instead.
Yeah.
right? And then it's more sport specific. Is the is a
Is a
general kind
theory. Yeah.
of theory.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just to put my thoughts out there, I think the most functional
Mm.
exercise that you could probably do
To
is
deadlift.
is a weighted carry.
Yeah, weighted carry. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Actually, that's good. I was going to
Yeah.
say deadlift. Deadlift or
Because
weighted carry or both.
yeah,
Well, I
I
suppose you
just
have
think
to deadlift something if you're going to do a weighted carry. So
and but obviously part of the weighted carry will be to lift it off the floor. But I mean, how many times do you in your day find yourself just standing there and squatting something heavy or picking
like
something
all
heavy
day.
up? Oh yeah, you're just there in the squat position. Yeah, just
Yeah,
making my breakfast.
when I'm moving around those baby cows, I'm like, come on,
Yeah.
let's go. Get underneath them.
Picking them up, all those hay
Yeah,
bales that you're doing, yeah,
yeah,
out in the farmland.
yeah, yeah.
I just think, like, carrying a shopper bag, carrying a bag, picking up your kid, but you're walking, you're moving something.
Yeah,
You're never just going to pick something up and then
yeah,
just put it back exactly where it was.
yeah,
It just doesn't make sense.
yeah. I think if you want to
So
do strong functional training for strength functional training, not
yeah,
like cardio conditioning, you should basically just do strongman training, like odd implements, either running with them, like really heavy odd implements and running with them,
yeah,
or pushing them over your head. Like
yeah,
because like a bench press is really unfunctional. Like how many times are you pushing something really heavy off of your chest?
yeah,
Like never. But you do put stuff above your head all the time.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that is something that happens, especially one-handed. And again, those awkward shapes. You think about like you move house, you're going to carry something awkward and probably lift it up and put it into somewhere, or
yeah,
things like that. So yeah, I do find if you're going to do functional training, I would actually just do strongman training if possible.
yeah.
Probably more fun for a start.
Absolutely right. Yes,
Although
and go on.
I was going to say, or if you want to get really specific, you should probably get like a 30-kilo iron. So when you're doing your iron,
You're having to like what prowl
yeah, yeah.
over your clothes.
Yeah. Have
Take a
you seen
prowl.
that? There was, I saw. Oh, I can't remember when they're doing that. Extreme ironing. It's a professional. It's not a professional sport, obviously, but
No,
the
it's not
people
professional.
actually do that. Like they've got to try and iron the clothes in like ridiculous conditions, like going over rapids or something stupid.
I've not seen this. I'll have to dig something out.
It's totally ridiculous. You should cut it in at this point. This is
I should.
functional.
That's it. Done.
Yeah.
Podcast over.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think let's just so we've said what functional is,
Yeah.
and it's there to represent day-to-day activities. What it absolutely isn't is how it kind of gets, and for no better word, this bastardized in the gym because, like you say, it's done for clickbait, it's done Instagram, it's the uneducated personal trainer trying to impress you by getting you to stand on something that just because it's difficult, or just because it looks difficult doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. And just because it can make you tired doesn't mean it's making you better.
Yeah.
And that's why you get these people standing on BOSU balls, one arm curl, and these weird exercises.
Yeah,
If
you're
you're
gonna
in,
stand on a BOSU ball with a dumbbell in the air while you're doing wood chops with the
yeah,
cable machine.
that's it. Yes, that's really, really functional because the amount of times you step on a BOSU ball during the day is, I know.
A lot. I mean, I've got them literally mounted on every step on my staircase.
Oh, are they? You know what would be
Like
even
Ninja
better?
Warrior, those like big bump things. Yeah. That's how I get up and down my stairs.
Oh, is that how you do it?
Mm.
Just bounce side to side, do you?
Yeah, that's why they call me Tom the Ninja.
Tom the Ninja. Yeah. Is that why you got tiny calves?
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess if your PT or if your coach is getting you to do these what look like Instagram clickbait
Yeah.
types of exercises, you probably want to find another personal trainer or you want to ask them exactly why, what's the sound reason behind this, and then strip some of that away. But okay, enough around functional training. We can maybe pick that up separately in another episode. So to talk about sports specific training, let's again cover what is sports specific and what is sports specific rightly done and what's sports specific incorrectly done. And then once we've got the correct version of that, and maybe we don't need to go into too much detail about weight training because we did cover that in a previous episode, which I'll try my best to link up. I'm absolutely rubbish at editing, so but I'll try and get a link to the video where we do kind of cover the types of exercises you want to do. All videos are timestamps, so you might want to skip the video a little bit further. I think we talk about it in an episode towards the end. But yeah, so and then we'll cover the pros and cons of the two. But let's start with what's again, like we did with functional, what's sports specific, what's the good and what's the bad of it? What
Yeah.
should you avoid?
Well, as we mentioned, so mimicking the movements of your sport, probably on an unstable surface or in a weighted environment, essentially.
Okay.
Is using overly heavy implements for the movement of your sport, or doing a movement that's very common in your sport, in like with a weight vest on, or with dumbbells or barbell, whatever that might be. If you
Yeah.
think, linemen in NFL, they do a lot of, like, they're pushing like this all the time, so you
Yeah.
see them do a lot of like dumbbell work in that movement perhaps, or
Yeah.
they're like pushing that and then doing something else, or
Yeah.
picking stuff up, tackling implements that are really heavy, or the rugby ball that's weighted, things like that.
Yeah.
Although sport specific exercises tend to get a bit meshed into, like, I don't know, just weird stuff
Yeah.
that people are doing that make really no sense whatsoever. Or it gets really strangely put into, like, you're basically just doing sprinting or conditioning work,
Yeah.
and you're not actually doing any strength exercising whatsoever.
Yeah. Agree. Yeah.
Um,
I will say though, my personal opinion is
mm,
when a when you're trying to apply strength to a skill element of a sport is when it absolutely goes wrong. And you've mentioned it a couple of times. I don't want people thinking it's the right thing to do. I think a weighted rugby ball is a terrible idea.
I think it is if you're weak as hell. Like, I think the when is the important key element. I would say, if you don't have a near elite level of strength, you do not need to do any sport specific training. You need to do some very basic barbell or dumbbell exercises to some relative strength standards, which you can find anywhere online. But to give a
Yeah.
kind of rough guide would be, like 1.5 to 2 times body weight squat, 2.5 times body weight deadlift, 1 times body weight over your head, one and a
Yeah.
half horizontal, something like that. Being able to do 10 pull-ups with your own body weight. Well, something
Yeah.
broadly like that. You can find a bunch of strength standards online, but if you can't do things like that, there is
Yeah.
just zero point in doing anything sport specific, because you're just never in an environment where you're actually developing strength, because you're unstable, you're doing a weird motion, so you're not really developing strength, you're developing skills,
Yeah.
motor patterns, or like really specific small things. And so, like, Bomper done a good study on people doing weight exercises on unstable surfaces, because the amount of people who say, oh, you should do that on an unstable surface, like a Swiss, do your dumbbell presses on a Swiss gym ball because it activates more of your core. Do that on that unstable surface because it activates more of your core. And they always talk about your core being more activated. But
Hmm.
all of the studies that come out on that show that if you do something on an unstable surface, it makes the weight reduce so dramatically that actually you have less core activation than if you're on a stable surface lifting a heavier weight.
Yeah.
So
Makes
there's not
sense.
there's not more core activation, and there's no more muscle activation, and you will not gain more strength from being on an unstable surface. What you will is improve, and where it can be useful, is improving coordination. So that, like, silly thing that they were doing on a BOSU ball passing the ball, that's not going to improve leg strength or something like that. But what it will improve is coordination and balance. And so, if
Yeah.
that's something you need to work on in your game, that makes sense. And when you're an elite level athlete, and those guys are not going to get that much stronger, especially if they're like deep into a
Hmm.
season and they don't really want to put huge amounts of weight on their back, they've got a competition coming up or whatever, something like that would be really useful, because they
Yeah.
want to improve coordination and stability in, sorry, not stability, balance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then it would be useful. But if you're just the average guy going to the gym, I wouldn't do any sport specific training at all. I would just get really strong.
Yeah.
That would be my first priority for any of this.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. So okay, so you're saying unless you move or unless you've got a stable or a decent strength foundation,
Yeah,
you basically stay away from anything sports specific.
yeah.
Okay. That I think
Because
that yeah.
you've got no strength to transfer into sport specific. You haven't, what are you? How are you
Yeah, exactly.
applying your strength when you've got no strength?
Yeah.
And it's like, go to the gym, get your body strong, and then
Yeah.
play your sport.
Yeah.
Especially if you're limited on time, like, and if you're doing separate training sessions and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not training 5 hours a day. You maybe can get 30 minutes to an hour or whatever.
Yeah.
Guys that are doing lots of that kind of thing, like, they might have done an hour and a half's workout prior to that, had a bit
Yeah.
of a break, and then come back and doing that stability work to improve coordination and balance.
Yeah.
It makes loads of sense when they're training for 3 or 4 hours a day. Like,
Yeah,
like
absolutely
because
does.
you
Yeah.
can't do a 1 rep max squat for 4 hours. Like, once it's done, it's done.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, time plays a factor. And like I said, when, like that when of like how where are you in the timeline? Are you an elite level athlete? Are you not?
Yeah. I guess you don't have to be an elite level athlete for then you to be able to kind of graduate the gym and be allowed to do strength. I think your point is absolutely right though, that you need to have some level of strength to transfer
Yeah.
into the sport. Um,
It can be
and that
useful
makes
for
sense.
mixing it up, like, and making things a bit more interesting. I do appreciate that element as well. And yeah, you
Yeah.
don't necessarily have to be an elite level athlete. I'm just, well, I hammer the point because people get away with it. They do like, they're like, oh, I can, they do a little bit of weight training and they're not really that strong. And then they're
Yeah.
doing all these weird exercises. And then 6 months later, they're crying that they're not any stronger. And it's like, well, you spent half the time in your gym stood on unstable surfaces or doing weird exercises instead of just doing really
Yeah.
basic movements
Yeah.
with basic implements, barbells and dumbbells. Like
Yeah.
there are so many people who have got ridiculously strong and incredible athletes with nothing more than a barbell or a set of dumbbells or whatever,
Yeah.
and they've never done any sports specific training
Yeah. Agree.
other than
Agree.
their actual sports training, like this skill. I mean, in the gym.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, 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 totally. That makes sense. And I think I really like your example of the football bar.
Mm.
The You get a lot of NFL players using, and it's kind of
Yeah,
where that bar came about,
yeah,
was because it's, instead of it being in this position, it's in this position because this is
yeah,
how they tackle. So
yeah.
they'll grab and then hold on to a player. So this is the pressing motion they need to be strongest in. So I get that sport specific element of it.
That I would do. Yes, I think that
That
is
totally makes
effective
sense. Yeah,
because you're still on a stable surface. You're still doing a press, like an incline
yeah,
press or an overhead, or even though I was doing a horizontal press,
yeah,
and you were gonna get really strong in that movement. And yeah, like you say, like in that plane makes a lot of sense.
yeah. And I think to kind of I've seen a video where there was a rugby player in a scrum position, or either break. I think it was a scrum position rather than more of a ruck position, and he had like elastic bands kind of attached to a squat rack in him, and was trying to pull out as fast and hard as he can, and then try and hold that position.
Yeah,
Which I get it, because like it's trying to mimic someone pushing against you, so you're learning that negative force.
yeah,
That I get. Um,
yeah.
they,
Isometrics, like they can play a good
yeah,
part. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, for sure. Like that's not a bad idea. But again, at the same time, like I bet he had a ton of bands and he was really strong.
He had quite a few bands on him. Yeah, it wasn't just one or two, and it was around the
Y-
hips, around the shoulders. There's different areas of force, and I would imagine at some point they would have put heavier bands on one side than another, just to
Yeah,
kind of create that imbalance that you now this side has to fight harder than this side, because in a
yeah,
scrum not everything is always pushing
yeah.
perfectly in the same
Great.
direction. Sometimes the opposition player twists in
Yeah,
a scrum or in a ruck, and you get hit from the side. So can you generate force and react? And that I totally get behind.
yeah,
I
yeah.
Even at the elite level, I cannot understand. In fact, I would say it's worse at an elite level to use a weighted ball, and I would say that for any sport.
Why do you
Um,
not like a weighted ball?
I don't like a weighted ball because I think it completely breaks the mechanics of the motion.
Yeah,
So, take a golfer for example. Now, a golfer who will spend his entire career mastering and like nailing down the swing, and
yeah,
it needs to be perfect and repetitive at each time, all the time. If you give him a weighted club,
mhm,
it's going to break his mechanics. He's going to completely learn different mechanics, and it's going to, on game day, he's going to throw his swing out. Just like if you do a heavy basketball and you've got to learn to perfect that arch and the distance that you need to land the ball in to score, then doing that with a weighted ball, then you get a match and you get a much lighter ball, you're going to overshoot easily. I, what I can get behind is moments before. So you often see cricketers do it when they're standing outside and they're ready to come into bat,
mm,
and they're just trying to wake up their muscles in their arms and the forearms. They'll hold two cricket bats and they'll do like, I don't know, 10 swings or something. And that's just, as soon as I've gone from 10 to 2, all right, now I've got my bat. But
yeah,
they spend all their time not doing that with a heavy bat. What they might do is they might use a thinner bat, because then now they're practicing how to time it with the middle of that bat. But again, they won't spend too much time, because again, it is very important for you to master that skill, because on game day, that is what you're going to use. That is the appliance. That is it. So
this is actually a really massive debate in sports science right now because there's no answer
yeah,
to this question. So you're talking what's called information processing systems, that you learn a
Yeah,
skill in isolation, and to perfect that skill, you should practice that skill specifically. Or you can have crap, I'm going to forget the name now. Uh, dynamic cognitive functioning, something like that. Dynamic something or other. Basically, you've got two schools of thought. One
okay.
is you learn a very specific set of like this is how to do something, and your neural pathways develop that by repeatedly doing the same thing again and again and again. And another school of thought is that you globally learn affordances that your body can do. And you get better
Yeah,
at identifying what you can and cannot do. And your body over time gets better at like, almost like narrowing it down. So instead of just like hammering away at one thing and making one path, you've got this global thing of what you can do, and you're just kind of fine tuning it like that.
yeah,
And so this is like, training with different equipment, training in different scenarios, training on different surfaces, training with different types of balls or equipment or whatever,
yeah,
versus, repeatedly training with the same thing in the same environments. And there's no real answer on it. Like the studies are inconclusive because nobody knows exactly how you learn a skill.
yeah,
There are theories, and those are the two main theories. There are other ones, but they're the two that most sports scientists will like one or the other. But
yeah,
there's probably as many studies on both that prove either one as one in any certain capacity. And so it's arguable that it's specific to the sport. Like you could think of something like a golf thing where it is very not monotonous, like very, you are always in exact environments, always in exact environments,
absolutely. Yeah,
specific all of the time, versus something like basketball where you are moving, perhaps you're off balance, perhaps you've only got one hand, perhaps you've got two hands in the ball, perhaps you're leant back, perhaps you're jumping backwards, perhaps you're jumping forwards, perhaps you're jumping sideways. And you've got so many different global environments that
yeah,
actually just practicing jumping up and down and shooting with the same ball would be detrimental
yeah,
because
absolutely. Yeah,
you need to
you're
be.
missing an aspect.
But there's people that have done both. That
Yeah,
you can probably get anybody in any sport where one person done nothing but jump up and down and practice doing it perfectly because their argument was, when I'm imperfect,
mm,
I will remember the perfect situation and I'll be able to do it. And then there'll be somebody else who practiced in all sorts of ridiculous ways, um, and they got better as well. And so there is actually no proven case
yeah,
yet. Like the debate is still out. I
yeah,
personally prefer the arguments for the dynamic stuff for dynamic, what I would consider dynamic sports. Like when you throw a rugby ball, you very rarely throw it in a perfect condition. Like it's wet or it's slippery or you've got not quite
yep,
got your hands in the right place. Somebody's about to smack you in the face. You're going to throw it with one hand out the back of your hand. You're going to
yep,
throw it upside down. You're going to be being tackled while you're passing it, and all of these different
yep.
elements. So I like the idea that you should train in all of these different environments by basically just mixing it up all of the time.
I
Like,
and I could, so I probably need to get this straight. I agree with that approach. I'm actually I agree with that. But in that scenario where someone's running at you as you're about to pass the ball versus the ball is wet versus you've
yeah,
literally just got off the floor or you're in tackle and you've got to offload,
yeah,
absolutely, yes, they're all very, very different scenarios. But the ball is still a 450-gram ball. It's still this size. It's not 5 kilos heavier, or
yeah,
a kilo. But so I would say do all of those stuff. Like learn to throw the ball as you're tumbling over, learn to throw the ball as someone's running at you and is about to clobber you. So that you have to be split second. Like shut your eyes, open the ball pass, like learn to so you're thinking faster, peripheral vision, practice that. I can totally get that. But I would still use a match day rugby ball. I would not use a weighted rugby ball to learn how to pass harder. I would just get stronger, or I'll look at what's wrong with my mechanics and I'll just throw more.
yeah,
Um, and I mean, I guess I kind of liken it to if you look at darts, and I use the golf example, but like darts, if you're sitting there throwing a heavy dart, then you come into match day, and now you've got your regular darts, your accuracy is going to be all over the place because you're like, well, I know I
I
didn't
think if
practice
you
this.
train, so I do know using like using the same. I do get it, but again, the arguments are still out on that. Like there have
Yeah,
been plenty of studies on using various equipment that's not the equipment that you're using in your sport, and studies are still inconclusive on it. Um, and what I would say from what I've seen or what I've read of various studies of where think people have fallen down and one has won over another
yeah,
is where this is a bit anecdotal. So, this is kind of my view of reading all these different studies is what I found is if somebody only throws that heavier ball, and then they go to a match day ball, they will be thrown off because they've practiced to rehearse in that. So the same with the darts. Like if you always throw a heavier dart and then you go to a lighter dart,
Yeah.
like your balance is off. But if they always trained with 27 different weighted darts and they always were mixing it up, and every time they pulled a dart out in their practice, it was a slightly different weight. And so they practiced their affordances and got acclimatized to, at different weights, this is how I throw it differently. In different environments, this is how I work. Then those people become adaptive to those environments,
Yeah.
and they seem to perform just as well as the person who has always practiced with one dart. So I'd
Yeah.
say, if you're practicing, if you are going to use, like, not use your sports equipment and use something like a weighted ball, things like that, I would make sure you are changing it up and constantly rotating your environments,
Yeah.
or just use it very sparingly.
Yeah.
A few times, like you mentioned about the cricketers just doing a bit of a warm up or something like that. You could do the same thing with the rugby boys, a bit of a progression of a warm up or something like that, but not
Yeah.
do it. But if you're only going to train with an item that is not your sports specific thing and you do a lot of it, I think that is where you come into those detriments that you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's what I've seen of the studies and my general thoughts of it.
Yeah, I agree, and I think probably bringing it closer to rugby, it's spot kicking. If you're going to do conversions, you can't just kick 20 meters in front of the post straight down when it's a nice sunny day outside. That's absolutely not going to happen. You're going to kick from different distances, from different angles, different types of surfaces, and you probably should use a few different tees just in case your match day tee isn't there,
Yeah.
and you have to use that. Maybe have someone put their finger on the ball just in case it's one of those windy days. So absolutely practice different environments, but I wouldn't expect you to ever kick with a 20-kilo rugby ball.
Yeah, don't
You know?
break your toes.
Exactly. Like, so that, I guess that's kind of where I'm going at it, and
Yeah.
and again, I think the science should eventually speak for itself, and if the science is undecided at the moment, that means there's probably something else going on, which is
Yeah.
why we haven't really nailed it down, or maybe there are just multiple pathways to learning a skill, which is absolutely fine as an answer. I
I done this actually, as my dissertation. I had one person practice a drive in cricket, front
Yeah.
flip, where the ball's like landing basically exactly every single time, and they're
Yeah.
just driving in exactly the same mechanical way. And then the other group are basically getting a kind of sporadic kind of, it could be it's still a drive front foot shot,
Yeah.
and it's still drive-ish, but it could be a straight drive, could be a curved drive, could be an on drive, and it's kind of sporadically coming at them a lot.
Yeah.
That was the subject of my dissertation, and the results were both groups improved in exactly the same rate. There was no difference between the groups at all.
Really.
Yeah,
See,
people,
interesting.
and
What was the test mechanism? How did you test that?
I had them face a bowling machine, and they had a zone to hit the ball into, and the ball was coming down at them at, I don't know whether it was like 60 kilometers an hour, 65, so it wasn't too
Yeah.
quick or anything. But these were all novices as well.
Yeah.
So their learning curve should have been quick in
Yeah.
general. But the improvement rate on both was just exactly the same. Both groups improved roughly about the same.
Yeah. I wonder if the test was similar to a real life situation with an actual bowler with a red cricket ball, maybe in whites on the pitch. I don't know how you replicate that and how you would test it. But if you've got one person practicing a bowling machine and one practicing someone throwing it down, and then the test is bowling machine,
No,
then
but one had it landing exactly,
right, I'm with you. Okay,
and they're hitting
yeah.
like a drop
Oh, I
thing.
see. Drop. Okay, so I thought you
And
meant one.
somebody's practicing the
Fine.
movement specifically, and the other person's having somebody throw the ball at them. So nobody saw a bowling action.
Okay, fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
because
Oh, a bowling machine. Okay.
or a
Yeah.
bowling machine, because I had to
Sure.
account for
Okay.
both of those.
Fine. Yeah. Because
So,
the thing I liken it to, and I get your point, and it's something I completely agree with. It's as kids, we obviously remember I came to rugby quite late, but I take a lot of my learnings from playing cricket, having played at a decent standard. Is I would play with my brothers in the garden, and sometimes we'll be playing on our front. In our front garden where it's a lot flatter, and then so we're throwing a ball and we're throwing it in the grass and we're trying to spin it. Whereas when we're in the back garden and it's got like a bit of a rocky place, we don't really need to do much. The ball just kind of plays about. But as batsmen, we got much better because we got to play on these odd surfaces where the ball's nipping about. We were never bad at playing spin, but because we were throwing it and bowling it, because it's a garden, sometimes we didn't have a lot of space. We wouldn't do the bowling action, but we'd throw it with like really awkward wrist positions.
yeah,
And what that meant was when we got to when we picked up a cricket ball, like bowling spin and leg spin and the googly and the deucer and this and that, where people are like, "How are you doing this?" Like, never done it before. You've told us this is how you do it, so we can do it
Yeah.
because we've sat there with like two pieces of A4 paper wrapped up in wrapped up together into a ball,
Yeah.
taped up by sellotape. That's turned into a ball because we don't have a tennis ball, or we're inside the house where we can't use a tennis ball. So we're
Yeah.
just going to sit there and we're going to throw out the front of our hand, but we're going to put our wrists in these really, really awkward positions to kind of release the ball, or we're going to play with our fingers to get the ball spinning in awkward to throw the other person off.
Yeah.
Which meant when it came to doing it with the cricket ball, like we could do that,
Yeah.
but we couldn't put it on the spot.
Yeah.
And that's where we had to practice that skill with a cricket ball
Yeah.
to then get it done into match day. And that's where I think the difference, and that's where I think that I don't think you should be practicing with a paper ball and then go into a match and try and do it because you're just never going to
You
land the
should
ball.
should also practice with
Yeah.
the implements of your sport, of course. But
Yeah.
probably the most famous one from cricket is Don Bradman. He used to train or do most of his training with a golf ball and a stump.
Yeah.
On
To get his hand eye in. Yeah.
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 On concrete as well, I think. Like he'd bounce it off of like a concrete ball.
It was against the wall.
Yeah.
Sometimes he would just do hits with the ball. Yeah.
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 And, to be, accurate. But then I'm sure there are people who have done nothing but ever face a bowler with a cricket ball with a cricket bat fully padded up.
Yeah.
Because they're only practicing in the environment that
Yeah.
they're going to face, and they probably were I'd say just as good. I mean, he's arguably the greatest batsman of all time, but
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to upset a lot of Australians, but I'm like, I don't know the bowlers back then. His stat speaks for itself. So, and the world says he is, and I'm like, you know what? I didn't see him. People that did see him.
One thing I do find is, or one thing I think about is that bowling hasn't changed a huge amount from back in terms of speeds. Like people could bowl at 90 miles an hour now, and they could bowl at 90 miles an hour then. Like the speed hasn't improved that much, but the ball swung more and the surfaces were crap. So it was significantly more difficult to bat because now the surfaces are more even, so you get a more consistent bounce, and the ball swings less, and you've got more protective equipment. So
I was going to say protection,
but the ball
and the boundaries were bigger,
and the boundaries were bigger. So I think it's significantly harder to bat not because they were bowling necessarily better, but because the conditions that they were like the equipment like the ball was swinging more. That's obviously going to be more difficult, and the surface being crap. And obviously, if you've got not got a helmet on, somebody's bowling a 95-mile-an-hour bouncer at your head.
Yeah,
because they're 7 foot tall, Courtney Ambrose or whatever.
Yep.
Bang! You're not sitting there front foot taking it on like KP, like just I'll just whack that for 6. You're getting out of the way, otherwise you're gonna die. Like
it's gonna hit you in the head. It's gonna with a nice flimsy baseball cap. Or your
exactly
international cap.
Green floppy cap.
That's it. Yeah, baggy green.
Green, that's the one. But with that is not anything to do with gym work. That is a bit more skill side of things, but it is an interesting approach to how you do different things. I really genuinely, I'm all for amateurs practicing in strange environment. I think you don't have to practice with a million different types of equipment, but I like small games, strange environments, conditioned games more than I like running up and down channels with I think that's very useful at the very beginning when if you can't throw and pass the ball, then obviously you need to start somewhere.
Yeah.
But as soon as you can pass the ball and you've got some sort of level, I think games, there's all sorts of different conditions all of the time.
Yeah.
There's lots of evidence on that actually on playing small-sided games with like various restrictions on it. Far improve amateurs way quicker than all of these like lined drills do.
Yeah, because you have to think faster. Absolutely, I totally.
You just get conditioned to the game better,
like
because it's how you catch the ball with somebody trying to tackle you, or things are awkward. You're not stood on a cone running to that cone. Like learn to run straight by running from one cone to the other. It's not learning to run straight. It's not learning to put your eyes up and realize actually I'm facing that way and the straight is there. So if I'm running and I'm good. You've got to do that in a game environment. They've done it a lot in Spain with Spanish football kids, and because all the Spanish kids were getting ridiculously good at football very, very quickly, and they were like, "Why are all these young Spanish kids so good?" And they looked at their training systems, and they all played on pitches relevant to the size of the kid. Whereas, like at 13, you play basically an adult-sized football pitch in the UK. The right size pitch, and they were playing huge amounts of small games. So they play like 3-on-3, 5-on-5,
Yeah.
4-on-5, like or odd amounts, 4-on-5, 6-on-4 type of thing.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. That's interesting.
Um,
Mixing it up that way.
yeah, make things difficult because I have you play in defense. That doesn't mean you've got 4 defenders and 3 attackers every time. Sometimes it's 4 attackers and you've got 3 defenders. Now keep the ball out.
Yeah.
How are you
Yep.
going to do that? Or vice versa. Like if you're the attacking team, you've probably got less people when you're attacking.
Yep.
Like, and so not making it even sides and putting restrictions in. That player can't move out of this box, or
Yep.
but he also can't be tackled, or various things like that to force people to do things like look up and pass.
Yeah.
When you're getting crushed, I'm going to look for the man in space because you've got a man who sits in a box who can't be tackled. He's always a man in space, right? So it's a
Yep.
really nice drill to teach people to look up and find the man in space
Yeah. That's quite
wherever
clever.
they are.
Yeah.
So things like that and conditioned games improve amateurs way quicker than running up and down in lines.
Yep. No, I totally agree with that. There's a couple of drills that come to mind. One I found really, really, and I think it's really important to do this because in rugby we just something I've seen, and you know what? It's funny when you see it at international level, but it's if an opposition does something, teams don't react to it until it's half time.
Yeah.
And I find it weird. Teams aren't reacting or changing strategy almost instantly. And I find it quite bizarre. And maybe because obviously cricket is such a start-stop game that almost after like a couple of deliveries, you've got a different plan. And you're setting plans and you're executing, you're watching what the person's doing and you're executing a different plan. And there's that constant feedback. Whereas, like, for example, and I think the example that I'll give before I go into the drills is England-Italy game.
Mm.
Do you remember the one where Italy weren't committing to the ruck and therefore they couldn't be offside because they weren't creating a ruck, but they couldn't be within a meter of the breakdown?
Mm.
And the first time I saw that happen, I was like, whoa, I've never seen this before. I didn't know that was a rule. So, I was that fresh faced to rugby. But after the third or fourth background,
Well, it's not a rule anymore.
It's not a rule. You can't do it.
I changed it after that because it was
Oh, I didn't know.
now even if you've only got one player from your position in the breakdown, they still have an offside.
Okay.
Unless they changed it again, I'm like 99% certain they put that in place.
Okay. Maybe someone will correct us.
Yeah,
Just listening to this.
I'm pretty certain they did because it would fundamentally change the game. If you didn't have to commit to a ruck and have an offside, you just never would. Why would you?
Because
because you lose 90% of the as soon as you know it's lost, you're just not going to bother and you're just going to huddle round them. And in fact, that would be the number one strategy: tackle and huddle, tackle and huddle. Like, why would you have a defensive line? You wouldn't anymore. It would fundamentally change the whole game.
I don't think you would. I think that's too easy to break. And this is what I was like watching it live, Italy doing it. I saw the first one. I was like, oh, that's bizarre. And then did it again. And then they did it again. I think it was like the third or fourth instance, probably 5-10 minutes into the game. I was like, pick and go. Just first person to break down, just pick and go. They're not committing. They're not putting men either side because they're just not creating. They're literally just standing next to you.
Yeah, but you have next to you, two men in front. Right,
but
they're not in the ruck. Yeah, but they could do. Like, if you think about the
of course.
That is, you have 2 men ready to tackle the pick and go.
Yeah,
and you have 2 men on the flank and 2 men behind us. So you just have a bubble following the ball, basically.
Yeah, and absolutely, you've got 2. But the thing is, now you've got 6 men in really, really close proximity to the ball, and not in a straight line, in a staggered line. That's going to create plenty of space elsewhere. So all someone like Danny Kerr or Ben Youngs has to do is just look up, pass it to 10 who just kick it into space. Like it's too easy to, because you're not in a straight line and you're going to find some players that like they basically surrounded the ball. You just got to get the ball out of there, which they can't be within a meter of him. So he can just literally wait, pick his pass, pick it up and go. And you don't have to commit your entire team to you just need one guy at the breakdown protecting the ball just in case they do decide to join the ruck, to join the breakdown. Yeah, so you've got your entire team, but they're 8 players. Yeah, I think it's, for me in my head, I'm like, it's such a I always look at the opposition and I go, what's the weakness? And in that strategy, what's the weakness? Well, the weakness is they've just got 8 people surrounded the ball, not in a straight line. That means there's 8 here or 6 here. Well, I've got a team of 14 and there's 2 or 3 of us here. So that means I've got numbers somewhere. So I need to look. And it was just bizarre that they're doing that. And then the drill, I don't know, I wasn't sure if you were at the training session, but the drill was, and this was while we were at Outcast, was that whenever there was a tackle, all of the players from the opposition side had to come in and touch the tackler, or you had to kind of all be linked together. And then until the opposition took the ball out, you couldn't move. So you're basically just forcing the defense to come in and having to spread out really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And but if you tackle the ball and let's say you're the opposition, so you tackle and then I go and I pick it and turn it and just play the ball straight away, because I've just gone in and played the ball straight away and not let the defense suck in. The defense doesn't have to suck in. But if we don't play the ball, the defense has to keep sucking in, and they have to come in and touch each other. And like, I think after the second breakdown, I was like, why don't we just go to the far corner, take the ball there, have a couple of breakdowns there, force them to we'll have a giant overlap with the other half of the pitch. But the team, like, no one was thinking that. Everyone was just running headlessly in different directions. I was like, why is no one just going corner? Because they'll go left, then they'll go right, then they went left, and then they went right. And I was like, well, you're like, suck them to the corner, go over there. But to bring that to a drill at Beckenham, so the first team coach Dan, he coached the first and the A's and the B, I think, so the backup to the first, so the twos. He had really good drills. So he'll have you half and half, but he had, like, the pitch went this way, but also went this way. And so if you scored a try, your next try had to be scored from here to here. So he'd literally so he'll put cones here and here, here and here, and then you'll have two cones here. And it basically just signifies this is the pitch. As soon as you score a try, your team has to run this side. And so basically it's just completely, by changing the angle of the game, like, almost everyone's out of position. So it's how quickly can you get back into position? How quickly can you sort your line?
You're just picking up and going round.
Yeah. So as an attacking team, it's quite easy to adjust to, because you put the ball down, like, scored, now turn around.
And you keep the ball.
You keep the ball until you get, and it's like 3 tackles or something, and then it's a turnover.
I like things like that. Like, you're changing the angle, making people think about their position. So, okay, I'm out of position, I've got to move.
Yep.
In a real environment, like.
Yep. And sometimes he'll do that. Sometimes it was, if you scored a try, then you would now score a try, but now you come back facing this way. So, and that created, gaps in the defensive lines. The defensive team had to quickly shape up. But it was one of those, if you did really shape up, it was almost impossible, unless someone tried to kick the ball over the top, to not get your 3 tackles in. It's touch. Like, you should be able to get 3 touches in. And then later down the line towards, I think more towards the season, and actually even in the season, a very, very good drill he used to do was, if we're doing like semi-contact, so you have to kind of hold and wrap the player, but you don't need to absolutely annihilate them. You make the tackle. If you're the tackler, then you have to take a knee. You have to stay down. And then sometimes it will be only one person needs to stay down, and that way there's a one person overlap somewhere. Or he'll be like, every time there's a tackler, that person has to stay down. So eventually the defensive team goes to the shorter and smaller and smaller and smaller until it's inevitable that a try is scored. As long as you keep the ball. And I think that's, in my mind, that is creating more of a rugby situation where either scenario where there's an overlap and only one person has to take a knee, or everyone has to keep taking a knee, because that's kind of teaching you play phases, and that way you're sucking players out, into one area, creating a huge overlap, which is kind of like just a player being put out of the position.
I mean, why do you do pick and go, the forwards, or why do you do it more? Suck players in. Why do you, why do you play into one corner, but you still have your winger on the opposite wing?
Yes.
So that you can create space somewhere. Like, all those. I think those teach people much better about positioning and where they're going. And I think it's useful to be obviously do those kind of conditioned games. I think they're very useful. But also tell the players why, so they can be conscious of it. Like, not just make them do something and then, or like let them play it a little bit.
Yeah, that's exactly what he is.
And then be like, what are we looking to achieve here? I need to do this, need to do this. Great. Okay. When are you thinking about that? Did it make people conscious of stuff?
Yep.
Get top of mind. Did it make them do it again?
Yeah, I definitely could have been way more vocal in this. Like, obviously being on the wing, or slightly towards the line, not absolutely in the middle in every phase. I just look at the drill, and I just think, I would think exactly what you're saying. Why has he set this drill? Why is a man down? What's the negative to this? What is this causing? Okay, which means the strategy is that the defense has to shape up and then get into position, and eventually a try is inevitable. So we have to steal the ball before then, or a try will be scored. Or why is he changing angles? And then he'll do exactly that. He'll literally let us run around for about the first 5-7 minutes headless, because no one's really. other than your 2 or 3 speedsters or tricksters who are just going to kick the ball and run, and they're going to just outgas everyone
Mm,
in these games. No one really kind of worked out the solution until he kind of got it together and went, all right, why did I do this? What
mm,
was the purpose of this drill? I didn't just do this for fun.
yeah,
There is something. And then what are you
yeah,
thinking? And then people are like, okay, now I get it.
yeah.
So, and I get that. And I get that's creating that real lesson. And I totally agree with training in those scenarios. I just wouldn't play those scenarios with a weighted ball. What I might do in those scenarios is you could probably put elastic bands on players or
Mm,
ropes, and then kind of pull players back as they're running, or slow them down in their running, so they're having to work a bit harder.
yeah.
But
I
you
mean,
could just do
you
that
could,
on the pitch anyway.
yeah, you could do. I mean, I would do it. I would use a weighted ball in some scenarios, depending. I just wouldn't overuse it, or like I've said before, like you
Yeah.
have to still change things up a bit. But you could use a weighted ball or an incredibly heavy ball, specifically because then you have to stand closer, you have to stand more narrow. When it's wet, raining, miserable, and very difficult conditions, having your back spread out a ridiculous amount is stupid.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
they get too far away from each other, and they
Yeah.
just have endless knock-ons. Same with
Yeah.
the forwards. Like then they're not thinking, wow, the ball's really difficult to catch and
Mm.
hold today, more so than it was yesterday. And so I need to be closer to my guy. I need to make sure I've got that ball secured before I'm taking contact. I'm not catching the ball into contact.
Yeah.
And so doing something like using either a very slippery ball, or using like a football or something that, or something that's more difficult, or go the opposite way. Use a handball. They're like small rubber balls, very easy to hold with one hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Use one of them, right? That's going to practice, throwing with one hand everywhere out the back of the hand and stuff. Or
Yeah.
do it with a rugby ball, use a small rugby ball or whatever and say, right, you have to throw that with one hand. You
Yeah.
can't
Okay.
use two hands on the ball anymore. Right? We can go against all of the grains of like
Yeah. Yeah. Everything the
everything.
same.
But I don't know. You find this, I, and again, this is anecdotal, but if you think of like lots of people that we know or that were good at lots of different sports, they often done silly things like that, just
Yeah,
incidentally,
for
like
sure.
of their own accord. Like they would just think, oh, I'm going to try. Like Dan Hewitt would be a good example. Would
I think so.
always be like, I'm going to throw this stone, see if I can turn that tap on, and then he could. And then he was just an excellent all-round sports guy.
Yeah, it was.
Like, and you just forever be doing silly things like that. Like, oh, let me see if I can use that ruler and that rubber to play this and do it that way. Let me see if I can do, and always been playing like with
Yeah.
the conditions that he was doing something in,
Yeah.
just as fun. And it is sometimes those things adds another element of like it is a bit more entertaining, it is a little bit more fun, especially if you're training children or
Absolutely.
things like
Yeah.
that, or
That get behind.
beginners where it's like it's frustrating because it's difficult. Okay, I'm trying to teach my beginners how to run properly and line up in rugby, but catching and throwing the rugby ball is really difficult. Well, let's get an easier ball. Like a
Yeah.
handball is a much easier thing to throw and pass.
Yeah.
So let's use that so they can focus on something else for this one, 10-minute section of my training.
Yeah.
So I would use different implements with purpose like that.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't use them. I wouldn't say do that. 80% of the time. I'd use it sporadically, or
Yeah.
as a section within each training, or as a warm up. They can be quite nice for things like that. I
Yeah.
remember doing a lot of warm up drills where I'd make like ridiculous rules, just because you're trying to warm up the players as much as anything else. So I'd always do things that are like you have to pass the ball between your legs, because it makes people bend over and stretch out their hamstrings and their back and stuff.
Yeah. That's clever.
Yeah, but it's a bit more fun than saying, let's swing your legs backwards and forwards for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You get everybody in a line, don't they? And they're all swinging their legs backwards and forwards, and it's like
Yeah.
boring. But it's
Yeah.
like, well, let's play, basically piggy in the middle, but you have to throw the ball between your legs.
Yeah. That's quite clever.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
doing silly things, especially with the kids, under 12s and stuff. That's way more entertaining for them.
Mm.
They don't want to stand in the line like doing high knees.
No, they don't. No,
But
no.
if you say throw the ball under your legs, some people are bending over and throwing it like between the legs like that. Others
Some
are
are lifting
lifting
their
one
legs.
up and
Yeah.
throwing it that way.
But
Great,
yeah.
got everything done, wonderful, and it was
Yeah.
much more fun. So
Absolutely.
use it like that could be nice.
Yeah. Adults enjoy that too. It's
Yeah,
not just
yeah,
kids.
we do. Yeah, yeah.
I know I would.
Yeah.
And if you look at other sports when they're warming up, at least,
Mm.
they especially like cricket, they're known for it. But they'll play football.
Mhm.
They don't warm up playing cricket. They warm up playing football. They'll get the rugby ball out, or they'll get an American football, or frisbee,
Yeah.
and they'll do anything but. And they'll, and they're not half decent sportsmen, obviously, because they're international level. They're not obviously fantastic at the sport that they're warming up in, but they're not bad. And they'll be doing tricks and stuff. And I think it goes to that point of just learning to do learning to
learning.
be in awkward positions, trying to achieve an
Yeah,
outcome in an awkward position. Because in a game day, that might happen. You might have to be falling over or rolling on the side as you're trying to pop a ball out. If you've never done that and you've only ever passed standing on your feet, looking to the left and never thrown to your right,
yep.
you're going to
Totally.
find throwing to your right really difficult. So
Yeah, that's what I like about that. I really forget the name. It's like dynamic cognitive something. Information processing system is just like really, and then it's the other ones.
sure.
But they always talk about affordances, learning what your body can afford to do or not
And
do.
not to, yeah,
And it's like this global, like you kind of roughly.
yep,
And the argument that they give is when you learn to walk, you don't learn to walk on a perfectly flat surface, or rather, you don't have to learn to walk on a flat surface and then relearn how to walk up a steep surface and then relearn how to walk and do all these like really individual specific things.
yeah,
But the information processing systems is like, well, you do learn that is what you do, because when you first walk uphill, suddenly you can't walk anymore. Like as a toddler, like if you see
yeah.
that you try and put them on
They
stairs,
stop. Yeah,
yeah, they suddenly can't do it. You get those like things you get in like toddler groups and stuff where they're like a little bit of a wave to make them walk up and down, or an uneven surface to get them to walk on.
yeah,
No, well, anyway, I mean, they both probably end up interchanging a little bit, but yeah, I like that. Like,
hmm,
learning things in. I'd probably not let it. I want to give some percentages a little bit to kind of, because probably people are thinking they can spend 80% of their time playing all these like ridiculous games instead of the actual game.
yeah. The other way around.
Probably, I would probably maybe even 50-50. I think
That
it's
much? Wow.
yeah, it's worth testing out and seeing what you like, what you don't like, what your team is responding to, what the
Yeah,
individual responding to. Because there's a lot to be said about morale and things. And what you like, if you're doing the same thing all the time, it can get quite repetitive, and especially if
yeah,
you've got an amateur team. Um, Even if you're wanting to become a professional, your ambition is that, and you're okay with doing things repeatedly because you know that's what you have to do.
yeah,
It can still just be a nice little change. And there is an argument of like, again, like learning all those different things would be are actually useful. It's not like
yeah,
it's a wasted
yeah,
opportunity. And so, but
yeah,
yeah, I probably wouldn't be going above 50% of the
yeah.
training time. I think that would start to get really excessive. But yes, I mean, 20-30% could be nice. If you ended up doing 50-50, especially with children, I think that would be okay.
Yeah. I can
Like,
see it. I can see 50-50 with kids because of the enjoyment factor. Um,
just making it different for them, getting
yeah,
them to learn how to use their bodies in different ways, especially if they're growing a lot. Teenagers, another one where you had a kid who was very good when he was 13 and he was 5'2", and now he's 14 and he's suddenly 6'2" and he's useless because he can't use his arms too long now, and he's like
yeah.
all over the place, and you
Balances.
see that all the time. So you do more balancing drills, or go back to that, like maybe he's having a real difficult time catching the ball because he can't use his arm, and you've got 3 or 4 or 5 players like that, put them in a group and use a ball that's easier to catch so they can get a bit more used to it again, like almost taking them backwards.
Hmm.
I think it could be useful in that context.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So bringing it back to, I suppose,
The gym work.
yeah. So we've kind of covered how you should train, and like I said, I did have a link earlier. In terms of sports specific exercises, now we've covered a few different sports, but the few that come immediately to mind is like band sprints and maybe box jumps or bounding for like wingers, which isn't necessarily a specific strength exercise, but that would be what I would classify as sports specific because it's kind of teaching them that bounding, getting out the blocks, and improving their dynamic and speed work. I would almost categorize everything as dynamic and speed work, which is kind of sport specific. Otherwise,
Yep.
I'm not sure what would really be classified as this is only really for rugby players and no one else is going to benefit from this.
Yeah, I think that's the
I
thing.
don't think there is one.
No, I think that's the concept to take away is like do good exercises in the gym. Like you
Yeah,
can make them relative to your sport if there's a good like the football bar, the
yeah,
American football bar.
yeah,
Instead of having your arms this way, you have them that way. Makes a lot of sense, and it's already good. It's not like you're standing on a BOSU ball with your dumbbell tied to your head or something stupid.
yeah,
Like it's a proper exercise you're doing. You're doing real strength work. You've just moved your hand position slightly. That makes a little bit more sense for your sport. I think all of that stuff is good.
yeah,
It is arguable to do something like um, I'd probably do this more in a warm up than it would really make it the exercise. Is like put a band around some part of your torso or shoulders or something anchored to one point so it's pulling you over, and then do squats or something, or an overhead,
hmm,
something like that. So you are like being pulled in one direction while
yeah.
trying to still exercise.
That makes sense.
some stuff like that can make a lot of sense if you've got a sport like rugby where you are often having to utilize a lot of strength in a very unbalanced environment. But again, I want to go back to all of the studies say you get stronger by training in a stable environment and then transferring it.
Yeah, because you're lifting more weight, which
Yeah.
makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can have an element of doing more balance work, especially if you're finding that you're not able to apply your strength very well, it's not transferring very well, then you probably have a coordination and a balance problem, which is a different component of fitness.
yeah,
Like they are components of fitness and you do need to train them to some capacity, but only doing your squats in unstable surfaces is not going to make you better and
yeah,
stronger. Supplementing a little bit of that so that you are better and you have better balance
yeah,
certainly can. But you can see a lot if you think about there's like skyline things like the type wire. You got to walk around.
yeah. Okay, yeah, yeah. I'm with you. Yeah, yeah,
You've seen people like if you see me or Juliet stand on them,
yep,
when I stand on it, my legs are going all over the place like this, and I can't possibly get my leg to stand still.
yeah,
Yeah, my legs are way stronger than Juliet's,
yeah.
but Juliet's quite good at it. And why is she quite good at it? Because she
Because she's done it.
practices it.
Yeah,
She's done it like a million times. Her dad's got it in his back garden.
yeah.
Like, and she's tried it, every time she's gone up there for like 10 years.
That's a
But
crazy thing to have in the bag on, but
yeah,
yeah,
it's only like a
like you
meter
say,
on
you
the
get
floor.
good at it, don't you? Yeah,
Yeah. And so there is I would look at that and go, okay, I'm not transferring my strength very well into this area. So I should practice that element
yep,
and that should
yep,
become part of my training process.
yep,
That's fine. But I'm not thinking, oh, I should get my legs stronger. So therefore, because my legs are not going to get stronger doing that. What they're
yep,
going to do is get better coordinated and get better at balance.
yep,
But if
yep,
I had good balance and I was able to stand on that, I wouldn't be like, oh, I should
yep,
do squats on this beam now. Like,
yep. I know, I totally agree, and I think a really good lesson for that is things like body weight exercises, pull ups, press ups, dips.
mm,
You can get really good at deadlifting. You can get really good at lat pull downs, or
yeah,
barbell rows. You can get really good at not squats, but bench press or shoulder press. But you might not see that transfer to pull ups and dips. Or press ups that much until you actually do pull ups and dips. And I've seen that myself where my deadlift has nearly doubled, but my pull ups have gone back because I stopped training them. And then
yeah,
as soon as I started training pull ups again, you think, oh, this is just a gym move. It's not. There is an element of coordination. And you find that if I do them every day for 3 or 4 sets of 5, if that's my maximum at that time,
mm,
within about a week, I'm doing 3 or 4 sets of 7, and I'm doing 3 or 4 sets of 9. And then it's back
mm,
to 10 plus or 15 plus strict body weight pull ups. Like very, very quickly, my body catches up. And I'm like, it can't be a strength thing because I didn't just suddenly gain
oh,
300% strength in the
yeah.
space of 3 weeks.
Yeah,
Um,
you
but
got
I'm
better
lifting
coordinated.
way more than my body weight off the floor in the deadlift, and so using my
Mm,
lats to keep the bar,
yeah,
so I can control that weight.
mm,
What's going on? It's an element of coordination, which I think you're absolutely spot on. That there needs
yeah,
to be an element of that, and I maybe it's just me. I don't see it in anyone else, and I think it's just me because I'm just completely unbalanced person. But first training session of the year, or the first match, or at least the first couple, I put the boots on and I go step on a rugby pitch. I'm like, like it's very, very subtle, very, very
yeah,
marginal, but I
yeah.
can feel it. Like I'm like,
You
I'm not
can't
balanced on
balance.
this at all.
Yeah,
And I can't, I feel like I can't run.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
after about a month or 2 months worth of training,
Yeah, you're
you're only
back into
really
it again.
training a couple of times, then
Yeah,
it completely goes and it feels normal being on
yeah,
the
yeah.
pitch. So I think you're absolutely right. As soon as you said kind of stepping on those
Yeah,
tight wires.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
They're funny things to say. I find them hilarious because I'm literally useless. Like
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, my legs are strong. Like this is not a strength thing. like,
No.
like it's just like, and Juliet's like, just stop your leg from moving, and I'm like, I can't.
I can't.
It won't. It just keeps doing it. I did the same thing actually when I've stood on BOSU balls before. Like if
Yeah.
you go to squat down, like the ball, I'm going, and then it starts going up and down. But it's a balance and coordination thing. I mean, thankfully I do strongman and powerlifting, so I don't care
Yeah.
that
About those symbols.
But like the guy going full circle back to the All Blacks, like that probably is a decent enough exercise for them to do because they've already done their strength work. They've already
Yeah.
done things like that, and this is some or it's an area that they need to address. It is something that is happening to them where they are not applying their forces very well, and so they do need to train in those types of environments. I'd say that's okay. Or you could do unilateral stuff, or like a dumbbelled thing, so the weights are individualized into a limb. That
Yeah.
could be another good way to make it sports more sports relevant, I suppose, because if you're not a power lifter, if you're a rugby player, when you lift, well, arguably when you lift somebody in the line out, you're lifting with two hands and it's one thing. It's not dumbbells, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, again, hand positions could be a good
Yeah.
one. I would mix in those type of things, but yeah.
Interesting. See, like, so when I saw that video,
Yeah.
I was about to like slap my head, and I was like, "Wow! Look, first of all, I don't actually know the reason why they're doing this exercise. I'd like to think the All Black strength and conditioning coach knows a little bit more than I do. So there must be a logical reason.
He knows a lot more than you do about Instagram algorithms. I can tell you
That's
that.
what he does. Yes, which is why I'm seeing his videos and he is not seeing our podcast. But if he is, please come on and tell us why you're doing this.
Yeah.
I would like to think a better drill would be to kind of create either get them to stand near a wall and get them to inch closer and closer to a wall and make sure they're passing. So now instead of being able to pass in that perfectly free motion that you would have, now you're passing the ball like kind of inside you, and then you're having to move your hips to allow the ball to pass. And like it's like, well, if you miss it, your hand's going to hit the wall, so you're going to hurt yourself a little bit.
Scrape all your skin off your.
Yeah. Obviously, like, and maybe you can like put like a a thin rope and just say avoid the rope or something, or find a way to do that.
No,
or put some
brick wall. So it really scrapes off the knuckles.
Brick unpainted.
Yeah.
That's Maybe go and actually scrape it up a little bit.
Yeah.
As rough as possible. I just think something like that, because then you're not, you're passing in a direction to your left, let's say, or to the right, whichever way you want to go. But you're not always passing in the perfect mechanics. It's like, cricketers having to sometimes throw a ball. They can stand there perfectly in the motion, throw a ball. Sometimes they have to stand and throw it like underarm, or kind of flicking it from the sides, or throwing off balance, like you said, with basketball players having to shoot off balance. I think for a rugby player, you can practice the off balance stuff, but sometimes just having to pass because you're like, oh, the player's a lot closer than I thought.
Yeah, doing all things like that, a nice kind of little drills to do. Again, I think
because it was
to highlight coming back to the time and when element. Like, do I think that's a good exercise to do as an amateur person, or do I think you'd be better doing an extra set of squats?
Yeah,
probably going to be better to do an extra set of squats, because as an amateur player, if you're twice as strong as your opposition, doesn't really matter if they're better at balancing than you are. You're going to crush them.
You are, absolutely. That I can get behind.
So, it is. Are you looking for a marginal gain or are you really unbalanced? Like, if you are unbalanced and really uncoordinated but quite strong, then perhaps you do want to implement it a bit more. And because I bet there's loads of people trying to do that now. Like, they would have seen that and been like, oh yeah, let's do that, and they're wasting time. Like, because you have a limited amount of time. You don't have, well, unless you don't. Like, if you have an unlimited amount of time to be doing, you can train all day, then fine, put it in.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, if you can, if you're at home still, 16, you've got a gym membership, and you've gone and done your strength work, and you can happily be at gym 2-3 hours. You've got a mate to throw it to. I still don't think you should do it, but hey, so I think that's probably a great point to wrap it up on. If you're not Aaron Smith and you're not donning the All Black number 9 shirt, and maybe not even to that level, but if you're not at a good standard, first of all, criteria number 1 is what's your strength like, and if it's not, as you say, like a near double bodyweight squat, near double bodyweight deadlift, and at least a bodyweight enough, and a bit more bench press or shoulder press. I don't know if you can hear my son in the background.
Yeah,
you can hear him. He's woken up. He's hungry now. If you're not hitting those markers, it's time to get stronger before you even think of doing any sports-specific exercise. And I agree.
Yeah.
Get stronger before you even do what is actually sports-specific exercise, which is your, bounding work and your box jumps and sprint work. That might be for you if you're a winger. And then if you're at a level above, so I, for example, might be something good for Callum, to do at his standard.
What's the thing is, like, you've never seen somebody who's really good at sport-specific balancing work who's ridiculously weak and like is also a good performer at their sport.
Yeah.
Like, but in terms of rugby, where strength plays a big
Absolutely.
Big part in it.
Strength is so important in rugby. That's number 1.
Yeah, and that's what we're talking about here, like those kind of, well, basically rugby or strength type based things.
Yeah.
And
don't major in the minors.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that I think, cool.
I was going to say, in the words of Mark Bell, strength is never weakness. Weakness is never a strength.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
You have it, folks. And just to say, I think most of the listeners on here are going to be people that probably will do better with the message of focus on the big list, focus on getting stronger, because they're the ones listening to this podcast, and not Aaron Smith. But Aaron, if you're listening, if you are, you got nothing better to do. Did you hear they lost?
No, I didn't actually.
They lost to Argentina.
Did they?
They got destroyed at 36-10 or something.
Were they not playing?
I don't know. I've been trying to find highlights of the game, but I don't want to watch the tries.
Who played or something.
I don't know. I want to see the highlights and see the squad that they put out.
Yeah.
Because I think they lost. That's 2 games they've lost on the bounce, because they lost to Australia in the Tri Nations Cup, even though they wrapped up the Bedeslow Cup. Now that it's the Tri Nations, it's the first game, and they lost. I think they've lost like 2 on the bounce, which doesn't happen in their history.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad for Argentina. Like that
for them. Yeah.
Like they're getting better and better and better, but then you start winning some more games, don't they?
Yeah. But, and they've got players that are now in like the French top 14. They've got players in the English Premiership. So they've got some players at some really good standards. It's just a chance for them to, the more they play together. It's a bit like England and Georgia. Even though it's a 14-0 battering, they're saying it already. Wait till next year. Give us a year to kind of play with you guys, and let's be in this tournament a little bit before we can learn. Because these guys probably aren't training as frequently and allowed to train on their own as England. Like they've probably got day jobs.
Yeah, maybe. I liked that. Like it's obviously it would be nice because they do obviously the Six Nations, and so that's the European sides, and then they do these autumn internationals normally to play the Southern Hemisphere sides. But there is nothing really, and then people like Georgia are always like, well, can we play in the Six Nations then? It's like, no.
Yeah.
Okay, well, can we do the autumn things? Well, we'd prefer to have New Zealand here because it'll get more. And it's like they're never going to improve if we don't put them in regular competitions. If you look at somebody like Italy as being a good example of that, like as soon as they entered the Six Nations, they got dramatically better within sort of half a decade. Become much more. So you do need to be able to put them into some sort of competition where they are playing.
Agree.
Sides, even if they're going to get battered the first 10 years, like. But it puts it on there, puts bums in seats. Look at the Japanese. They've had a big boost in participants into rugby since they obviously hosted the World Cup, but also then all their players got better and they were starting to play better teams and like their teams.
Absolutely. Well, it turned around for them, didn't they, when they beat South Africa in the World Cup here in England? And since then, it's just been a very, very different sport for them. It's taken a complete different shape. So no, I agree with that. That's very true.
Yeah. So it's nice to see them playing, like putting them in the side and get them some viewership on the whole thing. Because why not? I think we don't need to play New Zealand, South Africa, and Australia. We could play one of them and then play Georgia, or play 2 of them and then play Georgia as well. Every time in the autumn internationals. Or if there's another team, we play Japan, Georgia, and New Zealand. Japan, Georgia, and South Africa. Japan, Georgia, and anytime, why not?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they should definitely pull these sides through and give them not just for us, but also for them. And we like to play against the Barbarians. So we have time to play against sides that kind of creates a very different game. It doesn't have to be New Zealand that sells tickets. Barbarian sells tickets, and that team is put together last minute. I get it. You're looking for the entertaining X factor, but give these players a chance. I mean, look at
it could be. I suppose it depends how they want to fix it. Or to give you have too many teams in it becomes a bit ridiculous. But because you could play New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, Japan, and Georgia every autumn. But I suppose then and they could tour the European sides, couldn't they?
Yeah.
So you have the Six Nations in the spring and the autumn internationals against all of those Southern Hemisphere plus Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, well, we have the Lions.
Too much. But...
you have the Lions tour. Why is there not a reverse tour? Why is it just the Northern Hemisphere teams going down to play the Southern Hemisphere teams, 3 Southern Hemisphere teams? Why don't, at some point the Southern Hemisphere teams come up to play us, and then they can play, like, New Zealand can play Georgia as their warm-up game, and that's just exposure to the All Blacks they're never going to get.
If you take the best of New Zealand, South Africa, and Australia, there's just nobody to beat them.
Yeah, fair enough.
Who are they going to play? Themselves.
Yeah, their A team versus their B team. No, but I mean, like, or they could just go tour around, play Japan. They could play Georgia. They could play Italy,
Yep.
and then maybe pick, like England or France, or
Yep.
1 year they can play England. The next year they come, they play the same teams, but then they play Ireland. And the next year they come and they play the same teams, they play Wales, and that way each of the four, on Scotland, and then that way every 4 or 5 years they come back to the original team, just to kind of reverse it. I mean, I do quite like the concept of Lions, and I get it that from a population standpoint, it probably evens out, but not in terms of a rugby pool, because obviously England has the world's biggest rugby pool.
Yeah.
But
Well, it could be interesting to do something like Lions, but play this like somebody like Georgia, because where you've got people from lots of different teams kind of coming together for an ad hoc thing,
Yeah.
they are more dysfunctional. They are more likely to lose or make mistakes than they're just having the England team, right? The
Yeah.
Lions are less likely to win a game than England are, or Ireland or Wales, or any of the teams that have been playing together for long periods of time. So it could be a really nice thing to play Japan and Georgia, because they're arguably potentially more competitive. But you've got people from all of the different nations in there, and
Yeah.
so it's interesting for everybody in England, Wales, Ireland. Like, they all want to watch, instead of it just being England versus Georgia. Now everybody's
Absolutely.
watching, all eyes on Georgia.
Yeah.
Right? And then it saves having to have like them play 5 games again. I mean, it would be better if they played, every European nation. Obviously, if you just put them in the 6 nations, but then it's like 7 nations. Is that a bit ridiculous? But
Yeah, and I mean, 7 nations. I wasn't saying that. I was saying maybe before the Lions tour, before the teams fly out, they play a mini tournament at home before they go out, just to see part of getting the team ready for playing 3 test matches. So anyway,
is there enough teams? Is there, because Georgia, Russia done all right, didn't they, in the World Cup?
Russia did okay. Uruguay won. Fiji probably needs a bit more airtime as well.
I was thinking in Europe, like, is there enough
I was just thinking in general.
To have a almost like a mini league, like, where you go up and down. So it's like 5 teams or 4 teams in a tiered system. So like 2 go up, 2 go down.
Oh, I see.
Because then,
from the 6 nations, so there's a relegation from the 6 nations, or
so instead of having the 6 nations, you have 8 teams in 2 leagues. So you play 3 games, right?
Yeah.
And then there can be like a playoff or something.
Yeah.
Or something like that. But then, because then it would be like Georgia, in the League One is England, Wales, Ireland, and France.
Yeah.
League Two is Scotland. Or so 2 of the nations from the 6 nations have to go into League Two, right?
Okay.
League Two is now Scotland, Italy, Georgia, and Russia.
Yeah. Okay.
But 2 people are coming down.
Yeah.
Like, 1 is definitely coming down. So it's like bottom is definitely going down, and the top of League One is coming up. And then whoever came second in League Two is playing third in League One, in a kind of
Yeah.
And so you're definitely getting a change of 1 team, which that could be, or just force 2 of them up and down, because that could just be funny. Like, because that means 1 year Russia and Georgia end up playing Ireland and Wales in the top division, and England are relegated because because that could easily happen. Like,
no. I don't know.
it mixes it around a little bit, and you're like, oh crap, we ended up in Div 2. But it gets more participation, and then if you manage to get 2 more teams, you make it to 10. 5 and 5 is a bit better. But if you start at 5 and 5, it's basically going to be Italy up and down.
Yeah, but then it gives another team a chance. So it might be, I think the right team is then in, isn't it? If Italy, and maybe not that it should be a swap, but what should happen is the team that is last plays the team that won the division below. But the winner of that goes into 6 nations. So if Italy do come last, but they beat Georgia, who happen to win their league, then Italy stay in the 6 nations.
Yeah, but then it's like 6 nations and what, like the 4 reserves who will play each other? Or you'd have to have like enough teams in that, wouldn't you? Georgia, Russia, and who else in Europe can play in that?
Yeah, what I'm saying is whatever team division you have, the winner gets a chance to beat or play the last position team in the 6 nations. And if they beat them, then they've earned the right to be in the 6 nations next year. And that way, if you come last, you're like, come on, Like if there is a gulf between the
Yeah.
top 5 and the sixth, you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm just going to keep coming in and out. That's not fair. What if I am the sixth best?
Mm.
And I think that's kind of the case where the top 5 are good. Then it's like Italy, who are bridging a gap, but there
Yeah.
is still quite a gap. But then Italy have got a big gap against the teams, and
I
maybe
wonder,
Georgia is the closest to them. And
yeah, I
Georgia,
wonder if it gives them a big kick up the arse as well to get better, so they don't get relegated out.
yeah, maybe. But then does that hurt a team like Italy a lot more, where they're trying to build and they're trying to, where the sport isn't
Yeah,
as
potentially.
prominent? But then you could argue, the likes of Georgia, where maybe rugby is their biggest sport. I don't know what the biggest sport is, but it might be handball or something. But
Yeah.
if rugby is a sport that they're potentially got more likely to be better at, then why shouldn't they be Italy? Just because Italy have had 10 goes at the Six Nations and they've not made enough of a gap, they should take a hit from it. But then it's really unfortunate you put all this effort in, and then it's the argument for why you shouldn't relegate teams from the English Premiership, because they go, it's such a bad, like you lose so much money going into that level below, and you're like, the team like Newcastle will go down, they lose so much money, but
Yeah.
they're all still way better than every other side. They're going to come straight back up, no matter who gets relegated. They
Yeah.
always come straight back up. But
But now they're
uh,
in a horrendous financial position. They
exactly,
can't compete in that top league anymore.
it makes it harder for them to compete. Yeah, because every time they get relegated, they lose like a significant lifeline or a bloodline of their team. Like kind of strip them of their quality players. They still have enough quality to always bounce up, but now they're lesser of a side.
Yeah.
And then
And they get
so
stuck in a bit of a
that's why
circle.
they're thinking of just capping it and saying you can't get relegated. You just come last. You just come last, and that. If there is a side that's dominating the division below, let's say won it 3 years in a row, you're like, oh, this side is really good. You just make the division bigger.
Yeah, I don't think I like
If
that though.
if the I can see the merits to it though,
I
because
can, but I think the problem is that you end up with an elitist, 20 clubs, and they're the only clubs that anybody will ever want to play for ever. And seeing as they are private enterprises, I, I think it's too valuable. Like, it's just you're basically saying to every other club, you're going out of business now, or you're never going
but
to,
you're not.
like, everybody's going to be trying to use you as a stepping stone to get into somewhere else, which they kind of do now, but in an element they don't, because they're like, well, we could win and we could go up, and I've been part of the team and we're building a squad and we're trying to, and that's part of the incentive and part of what they're doing.
Yeah,
Whereas if it's like, we're definitely never going up, it's like, I'm coming here to perform as me and do really well to get into that top league, and I do not
yeah,
care about this team at all. I
yeah.
don't know. I just it becomes elitist. I think is
I
argument.
I can see the point, but I think it becomes elitist if it's completely blocked and permanently blocked. I'm not sure if it becomes elitist if you go, look, we're going to have these top 12 teams because we know that they're a standout to the rest of you.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to cap them off so that they don't go down, and that will improve the quality of the top game, because sides like, let's say, Newcastle, or rebuilding sides like Leicester Tigers, who were amazing at one point but now struggling, don't have to worry about getting relegated, and then that way they can look for investment, look for money, get that pumped into it, sign the right players, and work their way back up and become more competitive. So I think you kind of do make that top 12 more competitive. And I get your point that it makes elitist, but only if there was never a way for a side that might be, they're like, oh yeah, we're, like Juventus is in Sierra, where
Mm.
they've won the league 10 years in a row or something ridiculous. They've won it every year since 2009. If you've got a side that's dominant, they've won it, they win the league, and then they win it again, and then they win it again. You're like, maybe we need to make a case of this side coming up.
So they might always just have their players pulled out. Like, they win the league, and then all their top players just get pulled out because they all want to play for the league above, and they team can't get promoted. I think that's.
Yeah, but
I
if their
also
players are going up, then that means there must be players coming down.
Yeah, but they don't not forced to go to the top team, because perhaps they were the top team because of those players, but now those players are left. I'd rather go into the team that came second or whatever. It's
Yeah, maybe. I can
I
kind of see
also
a point.
like
Yeah,
I also like the
yeah,
way the English system is set up, is that any team can end up in the Premiership. Like, the outcasts could have ended up playing in the Premiership,
yeah.
because you can constantly get promoted. It's not the same in football, cricket, and things like that.
Yeah, no, you're right.
You have to
I think you can in football.
I think you can think.
I think football you can. You can't in cricket, because obviously as soon as you hit the amateur top level of amateur level, that's it. You have to go become a pro. You have to represent your county.
Well, I mean, maybe I understood. I'm sure,
I
because
thought football was just div.
slightly different. Because they're not the same association. Or maybe you can.
Maybe it is. I don't know.
But, like, I know for rugby, for definitely, like, you
Mm.
can build a team. You can build a unit of a club, right? And
Yeah, do what
they do it
Exeter
in
done.
ways.
Yeah,
So yeah, there's
yeah.
loads of good examples.
Bristol have done it. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I just think you wouldn't get that because nobody would put the time and effort in because
yeah,
they're just like, well, I'm going to do everything I can to get into that top team
yeah,
because I'm blocked otherwise. I'm just
yeah. Or you go to the argument, or the example I gave earlier. Top two teams go into a knockout with the other two teams.
yeah.
So the bottom two play the top two, and to see if they destroy them, then they should stay in their division and they should stay up. But if they
Yeah,
lose
that's
to
not
them,
bad. Yeah, because you get the opportunity to go. I think there still has to be the opportunity for sure,
that way the
and
opportunity is there. Yeah,
and it not be somebody's judgment. Like
yeah,
you get the opportunity to show your performance, not like, oh, we won it 3 years in a row. Well, yeah, you can't. But I don't think you're playing that well.
yeah. Okay,
Like
yeah, I get that.
maybe, or if you make it a definitive, like you win twice in a row, you're definitely coming up. But then who do you replace? Or if somebody comes bottom twice, they definitely go down. But then it's like blind luck of who comes up and down. So
Yeah,
I don't mind that like a playoff. Like they
yeah,
have that in football, right, where the first place goes up, but then
yeah,
the next place or first two go up, and then the next four all go into a playoff,
yeah.
or whatever it is. There's similar sort of things in different sports, and I quite like that system because it's exciting.
Yeah, I get it. But obviously, there's just so much money in football. Like, obviously, besides the cherry to go into the Premiership, like even just that jump into the Premiership, even if you get relegated, you're so financially better off than everyone else.
Yeah,
Whereas rugby doesn't have as much financial reward. There is a financial reward, obviously,
yeah,
but I don't think it's as like it doesn't set yourself up for the next 5-10 years.
yeah.
And that's kind of I think it's football's most lucrative like matches played when you play the playoff final. It's football's most lucrative map.
Yeah, it's worse because as soon as even you come back down, you get the parachment payments, don't you? But
Yeah,
like, it's detrimental for a club that's been up for a long time and then it kind of
then
falls
comes back down. Yeah,
too much. But if you're like a little club and manage to get up for a season, you
yeah,
get such a ridiculous influx of cash. You can like Brighton or something, really change their fortunes by being able to go up and then just stay up just enough, and
yeah.
now they're in a really good spot.
That's it. Yeah, yeah,
Just change a lot of things. If they went back down, they would really hurt, and it'd be really
absolutely. Yep.
type of thing.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
couple of tangent now, aren't we?
yeah, slightly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's what we normally do. We just talk about
Yeah.
this stuff, and so we thought, why not record it?
Yeah.
But yeah, let's wrap that up. I think Isaac's plenty hungry,
Yeah. Yeah.
screaming loads. So I'm sure listeners don't want to don't want to hear him yelling in the background because he will rise through at any moment. So
Yeah.
we'll wrap that one up there. Thanks for your
Yeah.
contribution, mate.
Right.
I'm sure there's plenty of useful insight for anyone. But if you've got any questions, comments, please put them below, and either Tom and I will happily answer them. And please don't forget to like and subscribe. But we'll leave it to then and see you all later.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye, mate.